Hey everybody, welcome back to the Audiomo podcast number 10. This is going to be an interesting one. We're going to cross a bunch of bridges that we've never crossed before, including getting into computer talk. But before we get into that, I have to welcome my co-host, David. How are you doing tonight, Dave?
You know, pretty tired, but pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm always tired, but I'm also pretty good. However, last night we're going to lead, speaking of computer stuff, more towards the actual kind of gear stuff, and it's kind of like a mini computer, and that is the Neural DSP Quad Cortex. Now, I've sung this thing's praises, man. I've criticized it where it's been, worthy of being criticized and where I feel it's justified, but overall I've had no real problems outside of the first one bricking on me, but their customer support was so good with getting me a replacement quickly. I was like, yeah, it's water under the bridge. It's a new release. Last night, I show up at the gig and I have 4 presets that I built that can use my guitar that go through the Black Star, one that will go to the PA, and 2 other ones depending on the kind of tones I'm going for. But they're all routed perfectly and they've worked in the past before. And in all of those also, there's a spot for my wife that has a little EQ on it, a little compressor, and a little reverb, right? So we're doing our sound check. I turn on the Quad Cortex, everything's plugged in good. And despite the outputs on the actual Quad Cortex being labeled correctly, where things are supposed to be going the right places, it's going through the PA, the amp is getting nothing. And I'm like, okay, something's wrong. And it's just the dry signal going to the PA. It's not wet. So I'm like, all right, something's really fishy here. I try the next preset, and it makes the sound of death that you never want to hear. Just like that, like, super high-pitched frequency. Like, oh, it's just the worst. I'm like, oh, okay. So I click the next one. It's quiet again. I'm like, okay, maybe this one will work. Again, same thing. The guitar is just silent this time, though. There's just nothing. I asked my wife, because I have this MacBook right next to it. And I'm like, am I getting any signal to this? Were you just talking to the microphone? Dead nothing. I checked the routing on the Quad Cortex itself. It all checks out perfect. For whatever reason, none of my presets work. I went to the factory presets to see if I was going to get anything at all. And sure enough, all those worked with my guitar. But, I mean, it's the presets with everything built in are not built in for, actually going into the amp or anything like that. And obviously, there was no vocal attachment to it. So in an effort to kind of salvage the gig and not spend too much time, I just completely bypassed the Quad Cortex for last night's gig. And this is very concerning to me because when I woke up and I checked the Quad Cortex kind of Facebook group, because it's the only thing I use Facebook for is for the Quad Cortex group to see what's going on. And somebody said last night, none of my presets worked. And I was like, oh, you got to be shitting me. I'm not the only one. And I'm not sure if it's because of the latest update to 1.2 or what it is, but I got home and I tried again, and I did everything minus the vocal, and everything worked perfectly fine. So it just decided not to work when I needed it to work, and I'm a little concerned. So I spent the latter half of the day today listening to YouTube demos, which is something I don't normally do. I was listening to the Walrus Audio, the ACS one, the Strymon Iridium, the Simplifier, and the new Boss one. The new Boss one, I forget what one it is, but it's a 200R, 200IR. And I haven't put the Quad Cortex for sale yet, but like, I'm really like starting to be like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, because if I can't trust it like every time to even just do what I know it can do at home, that's very concerning. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like we've been transitioning to an in-the-box system for live stuff too, right? And I mean, the whole thing is reliability, and it's kind of the only thing you need out of it. We've tried our best to try to move over to things that are as stupid as possible for that specific reason, where so we use a Cymatic audio for playback, which is like basically just a flash hard drive that goes multi-out, so the chances of it messing up are nothing. Actually, we used to use this it was a Roland SPD1, which was literally just like a hit pad that would save custom wave files on it, and we'd use that for backing tracks because it was like completely rock solid. It was so stupid it could never mess up. And sometimes it's like these bigger solutions, you know, like with like the Quad Cortex or the Stomp or a Kemper or you know, Fractal Audio or anything like that. I mean, it's a computer, right? And you have to deal with computer-sized problems sometimes. It's kind of why we've really strayed away from trying to have anything like a MacBook or a laptop or anything sort of running the rig, right? Because it's just like it could just be one day. You know, back in the day, we saw Scale the Summit play out in Hartford, and they were running their whole session off Logic, and the thing just completely crashed in the middle of their set, and they got both of their amps, which were running MIDI through the Logic session, were stuck on clean, so they played the whole rest of the show clean guitars with none of the backing stuff running. They had like a visualizer that was running in the background and everything that just like wasn't working. And ever since I saw that show, I'm like, all right, how do we make sure that this can't happen? And I mean, there's no way you can totally ensure it, but it's crazy, man. You gotta, I know that they've been having some troubles out the gate with some of the stuff, and it seems like they kind of maybe overpromised and underdelivered a little bit. But you know, I would got to think this has to be, you know, in the product world, the MVP version of this has to be rock solid. Like that's, you know, thing number one. So it's disappointing to hear that, you know, anybody's having issues with it like this.
It just sucks. And it sucks on a few levels because I tried so hard to because they treated me so well. And I can't stress this enough because their customer service when I did have that problem, and I was pissed off. And you could see it in that video when I made it about the Quad Cortex bricking, like one of the first days I had it. I was really mad. And they did such a good job of getting a new one in my hands that I was like, this is how customer service is supposed to be. So I want to give every little bit of the doubt and like little leadway I can with a company that's going to go out of its way to be this good. But at the end of the day here, I used that Stomp forever. And I used the Helix forever. I never had a problem, not once. And this is, it's really, really concerning. And part of me is even debating, like, even if I don't sell the Quad Cortex, having a Stomp back on my board, just like as insurance. But then at that point, like, how ridiculous is that? I have a $1,900 plus tax Quad Cortex that I need to have a $600 potential backup solution for in case something goes wrong. It makes me really miss the days of playing just straight up 2 drive pedals, a fuzz pedal, a delay pedal into an amp. That's it. There's no digital anything. And I mean, nothing could go wrong. And in the case where something goes wrong in that instance, you have the backline amp, whatever amp of the gig that you're playing at. So it'll plug right into it. It's not going to be the same tone, but you're still going to have drive. You're still going to have the delays. Like, you're still going to be able to play the gig. Whereas if something really went and I wasn't using an amp and I couldn't bypass this, I would have been playing guitar direct into the PA. So, and that would have sounded like shit. Honestly, clean guitar right into a PA with no IRs, no cab simulation, no nothing. Oh, that would have been atrocious. That would have been just unbearable. So, I mean, again, I don't know that this is going to be the thing that makes me get rid of the Quad Cortex because, I don't know, I'm not that fickle. Maybe if I was younger, I probably would. But this is a serious red flag.
I mean, are you a one and done? Are you never giving it a shot on a show again, or are you gonna give it one more go and let you down one more time before you say no way?
I think it depends on the size of the show. We have another kind of smaller coffee house-ish size show coming up, and that one's just like, you know, if I try it there and something goes wrong, I'm not really gonna give a shit. But if I'm playing at a decent venue, I don't know if that was my next gig, if you know what I mean. If my next gig was at a decent venue, I would be planning without using it this time. So, but that's terrifying because again, it's a $2,000 piece of gear that right now sells for well more than I paid for it, and it would sell easily for well more than I paid for it. So, I really don't know what I'm gonna do here. But that forget the looper, forget the plugins, forget all this other stuff that people are saying. It doesn't sound good. I think it sounds great, but at the end of the day, if I can't depend on it, what the hell's the point?
Yep, exactly. I mean, if nothing else, though, this does sing a praise for the Stomp, that you can keep the Stomp as a backup, and it's like, it's not even taking up space on your pedal board. I mean, it's the great part about the Stomp, right? I have one, our bass player has one. They're fantastic. Like, I will say that I do think the Neural DSP stuff sounds better. I really do. But Everybody I know who uses the Helix stuff has never had issues with them. I've never ever heard of them going down during shows or anything like that. And we know tons of people who use them. And it's the size of two pedals. Like it's just, and honestly, I think it's really just that Line 6 has been doing this forever, right? I mean, obviously this is Neural DSP's first big hardware product, and there's going to be some growing pains there. It just sucks that they are in this space where it's like, you don't have time to make these growing pain mistakes, like I said, MVP of this product needs to be out the gate super reliable, and they're putting together a complicated device, and you almost can't blame them, but it needed to be a higher standard than this,
Yeah, you have to blame them. I'll just come out and say, I mean, you have to blame, not just for like that, you know what I mean? It's just a matter of they're their own biggest enemy and the victim of themselves in many ways. And I don't know, like, I don't want to say anything bad about them because they have been so good. It's just, it really, really makes me think, you know what I mean? And when I see other people, like, think about if you were really, like, you're out on tour, right? Like a tour. What do you do in the middle of Bumblefuck, Ohio, and it gives out, and you got to play the next night again, 300 miles away. So you're in the van. You got to go to the next place. Do you have time to go and pick up something? Is anything going to be in stock that's going to do it? You're going to redo your whole rig basically in the van with what power? Like, you're going to, no, it's,
I mean, yeah. And I think what's really the big bummer here too is that all it takes is a little while of this, right? Like, let's say new firmware update comes and fixes this completely, right? If this happens for long enough, they've trashed the reliability of the brand, right? And, again, this is your product. This is your, kind of experience with it, right? And obviously you're saying you've seen some stuff on Facebook that's sort of mimicking the same thoughts. But, like, let you go 6 months with a product that's iffy on people, especially, touring musicians. Like, they're not going to get it back no matter how reliable it becomes after the 6 months, So I think they hopefully they're aware. Hopefully they're working on it. It sounds like if they have any kind of reasonable customer service, I'm sure that they're doing everything they can to get on it. But sometimes this stuff just isn't that quick of a fix, and hopefully they can turn it around before it's too late for them to turn it around.
I agree. And my dad had an interesting quote. I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember it exactly, but at the end of all of his emails, because he worked in sales for years and tech installations, it takes, forever to earn a customer for life. But it only takes a minute or one bad decision to lose them right back again and never get them back. And I'm not there, obviously. Otherwise, the thing would be for sale. And I would have made it a point of my reference of today's video. I mean, I said the gig went well because I didn't want... The gig did go well because I was like, I'm not going to play this game. Like, I'm just going to use what I know is going to work. I'm just going to bypass this thing and I'll figure it out when I get home. But this has been bothering me since last night. And I don't know. And... It's interesting too because at home I never have a problem with this thing. I use it every single day for all these videos and all that, and that's cute and all, but I don't need a $2,000 piece of gear to make YouTube videos. I could literally just use the Neural DSP plugins to demo all these guitars or to do anything I need to do with that stuff. I would be just fine. So if the main purpose of it turns into that and I'm not going to be taking it out to play live, then I shouldn't keep it. So
yeah, there's far cheaper ways to do exactly what you're doing.
I agree. So I don't know, but like I said, I'm not making any hard decisions right now, and I'm not going to sit here and trash the product, but this was enough to freak me out of it. What I did want to ask you though, of those products that I kind of mentioned, that I was considering here, the IR/cab emulator ones, do you have any experience with them?
I don't with that one. Actually, I had this really weird kind of trial that I did a little while ago. I got access to one of the old beans, the pods, little Line 6 pod guys. And I had seen a couple of videos about how decent the pod sounds if you bypass their IRs, right? Because back in the day, they weren't really doing IRs anyway. It was just a really shitty frequency, EQ curve. So I grabbed one because I saw one for like $40 somewhere or something. And then Moore sells a very cheap little pedal that lets you load custom IRs onto it. I actually think it was like 150, maybe even 100. I can't remember. It was very cheap, right? And I bought this little guy. It's a nano pedal size, and you can load as many IRs on it as you want, basically. So I grabbed one of those and I threw a bunch of the own hammer IRs that I have on it, and then I used the pod as the front end, or whatever else you wanted, and it's fantastic, and it's just too stupid to fail, really. I've heard great things about most of those pedals that you said. As far as like bomb proof, I always think like Boss is the smart way to go when it comes to that, because they've just been doing it forever. I know their stuff really never messes up. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to go now. I mean, especially with something like that Moore pedal where it's just the IRs. Like if I wanted to now, I could take that Kraken pedal and I could throw that after it, and I would have a Kraken preamp and my custom IRs that I've made and great IRs I already own, and it would it costs you as much as whatever you want to put in front of it, and I believe $150 or whatever for an IR pedal.
That's really cheap. And you mentioned own hammer. One thing I like about, I think it's the Strymon, that comes loaded with some of the own hammer stuff as the IRs. Like, and when you say bomb proof, the two companies that I think of, one is Boss, which is kind of why I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And the other one is Strymon, who I love Strymon stuff. Their stuff is not, maybe it doesn't have the most features on it. Maybe it doesn't have the most kind of IO flexibility that some of the other ones do. But I know the Strymon's going to work. So part of me is tempted to get it, but then at the end of the day, it's like, why am I just going to buy a $400 pedal as an insurance policy? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you've already got the stomp. To be honest with you, I think I'd argue that kind of makes most sense as your insurance, right? I mean, it's it's at least the biggest like one-for-one replacement.
It is, but I don't have the stomp anymore. I sold it.
Oh, you don't? Oh. Ooh.
That's why it's become I don't know. Do I rebuy a stomp or do I go one of these other routes? Because I did like the stomp, but I'm so happy with the delays of the Volante. I'm so happy with the modulation that I get out of the Zelza. I don't necessarily need all that other stuff. So maybe just having, because the Strymon has the Vox emulation, AC15 or AC30, the Fender Blackface Deluxe, and a Marshall, a Plexi sound. And that's pretty much it. And then 3 cabinets that you could pick for each one. So, I mean, it would be more than enough to do what you got to do.
It would be, yeah. I mean, and there's a few other, I think there's a lot of options in that space too, right? Of the kind of dumber pedal versions. I think Mesa makes one that sounds pretty good too. If you're, kind of into that thing. I think, honestly, for what you do, the Strymon, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think for what you do, the Strymon would probably be the way to go. It is kind of expensive for the options, and that's why maybe for $400, like, you could probably pick up a used stomp for that if you really wanted to. I think I picked mine up for $400, and you're going to get more options. But that being said, it is a potential failure in the way that the Strymon's probably not, right? Because I'm not sure how they're doing their emulation, but it's certainly not as complicated as a stomp is, right?
No, God, no.
Yeah.
I laughed at that. I'm sorry. I've dealt with some Mesa stuff that was, I like their amps, but the cab clone kind of stuff and all that, I've not been the biggest fan of. So.
I mean, your other option too is if you really wanted to, like, you go get one of those little Rev heads. That thing's got all the IR stuff on the back anyway too, right? Like, you get a head, you get IRs, you got all that.
I went down that route, and I will say this about my experience with Rev. I had the G20, which in hindsight was the wrong one for me to buy, because I think the D20 would have been a better fit for me, because it's more of a pedal platform and more of a clean amp. But I felt like it was a sterile amp. I thought it was a very, very, very advanced amp. I loved what it could do, but I didn't love how it sounded. It just had like a really generic sound to it, to me and to my ears. And I was like, I don't really know if I like this personally. So, and the other problem with the Rev is they don't make a combo. So if I'm gonna buy the Rev, then I got to buy another speaker for it. So it's like, it's not just like I can get away with spending $1,000 on the head. And then at that point, I'm at like $1,500 minimum here. At what am I saving?
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird spot. You're in a weird spot, right? Where it's like you could spend a lot of money or you could spend a little money, and you're kind of going to get out of it where you're going to get out of it. You know, I think for what you do and the sounds you go for, the Strymon's probably the smartest move. You know, although if you want more flexibility, I think you could do that or the Stomp, and those would be great options for backups. But again, I think to your point, I mean, I don't know. I'd give the Cortex a couple more goes here and really, like, you know, obviously, you know, put some insurance into the rig, have a backup ready to go. But I think just at the price you paid for it, right? You got to at least give it a couple of more goes, right?
It's like the guy who buys the Ferrari, and every time he leaves the driveway,
something breaks.
Something breaks. Yeah, no, I don't know. We'll see. Again, I'm not listing it for sale yet, but I part of me is leaning back towards the Stomp because I know it. But then the other part of me is like, you know, just get the Strymon because it's less shit for you to screw with. And we were just talking before we started this podcast about, like, I only had like an hour before I had to go to bed. You were telling me about this because you had a busy week. With me, it's really similar, obviously. And so when I'm not making the videos, or if I'm going to be making a video, in this case, it actually applies more, and I'm using a guitar, I don't want to sit there and dial shit in anymore. Like, I just want it to be like, I turn it on, it sounds good, it goes into Pro Tools, I'm done. I don't want to tweak. I don't want to do that. I'm over it. So that's part of me is just like, yeah, the Stomp will give me more in theory, but I mean, the Strymon would be like, I'm done. Like, okay, I dialed in what I want. It's like freaking four knobs.
I get that. I mean, we do for our live stuff, like, I run all of my, obviously because I'm singing and playing guitar, like, I don't want to touch the pedal. So I run all of my changes via MIDI. Like on backing tracks that we send out, and like even just going through the session and programming out all of the MIDI changes and then all the snapshots that I have to have for each set for every part of the song, like that in itself takes hours. And then, you know, if one of those things goes wrong, it's like kind of the whole thing's a little, so it's this, like, it's a process that you have to love and want to do. Whereas, you know, there's something about just having a couple of pedals in front of an amp that's just like, damn, you know, like, especially if I wasn't singing, I probably wouldn't care. But it's like, for me, I can't be thinking about more than what my fingers are doing and what my mouth is doing, or I'm fucking something up, you know?
I understand, but yeah, because I don't sing and I do backups like once in a while, but I'm not like the lead singer. I don't mind, and I've always been that guy with a few pedals. Like, I don't have one of those mega pedal boards, but I've always had a few pedals. It's easy. It's not a big deal to me. So I don't know. Rather than sit here and continue to beat the horse, I think we made the point on it, but it's just something that I feel really needed to be addressed. However, sticking on the topic of computers and technology, you wanted to bring up some Apple stuff, so I'm going to let you go at it.
Yeah, I'm just curious, man. I'm sure the entire world at this point has heard about the new MacBook Pros, right? I feel like they've been around the circuit at this point. We've seen all the YouTube reviews. Obviously, you know, we knew what we were going to get. Everyone thinks they're amazing. And I don't disagree, right? You know, if you've been under a rock, you know, just to kind of, you know, paraphrase what's going on, Apple has decided to boot Intel as their chip manufacturer, and they now produce their own SoCs, right? So they obviously started, I don't know, maybe it was like 6 months ago at this point with the M1, maybe even longer than that. Year ago, yeah, with the M1. And that was their first foray. It's a fantastic little chip. I actually own one of the Apple Minis, the Mac Minis, the small guys, yep. And it's great, and it runs everything great. Our bass player has one too. He runs Logic on it, and it runs fantastically. He says he never runs into any issues. Obviously, you know, anything that they're kind of optimizing for their own chips runs amazing, right? And then they just came out with the Pros. They announced the M1 Max and the M1 Pro. And I believe the main difference between the two is GPU power. But they are significantly more upgraded than the M1 even, right? You know, and I mean, I feel like as a studio guy, right, we always get the like, oh man, you're going to get the new Macs. What are you going to do? I personally work on a Windows, mostly just because I think bang for buck is kind of, it's on the Windows level. But I have worked on a Mac in the past because they're pretty rock solid, and there's something to be said for that. But we work in Pro Tools, so I'm always sort of curious about this. Like, this new stuff comes out, Mac's killing it with their new SoCs, right? These things are flooring everybody with their performance, and like part of me is kind of like, man, it'd be really cool to kind of get in on this like area, But I mean, am I really going to see the performance gains if I'm not over in Logic, And like that always just gives me this thought of like, what would it take for me to switch to Logic, And I don't know. You're a Pro Tools guy too, and now you're giving me the big head shake. So I think I know where this answer is going to go already. But what would it take for you to switch to Logic?
Pro Tools not existing anymore. It's that simple. And honestly, it's nothing like personally against Logic. It's just that I've always used Pro Tools. I've tried Cubase. I've tried everything else minus Studio One's the only one I haven't really screwed with. I've tried all of them. I always, within like 10 minutes, I don't, it goes back to that conversation we were just having about me being like, I don't want to deal with shit. I want shit that I know, and I want shit that works. For me, Pro Tools is just the king. It just works. Now, tying this back into what you were just talking about, my main computer that does all of my editing work and all my Pro Tools work is an M1 MacBook Pro. So, if I have to comment on the performance of just the one that I have, not the new ones that have just been announced, this thing, the way it works in Pro Tools is flawless. I have not had a single crash. I have not had any issues. This thing handles every single thing I throw at it, which is amazing. The neural programs, which eat up a ton of RAM, they're very heavy. Butter. I could have 10 running at once. I don't do that, but I could. I did it just to see if I could. And there was not any sort of kind of hiccup on low latency. But the big thing to me, and this won't mean a lot to a lot of people, but if you're somebody that has a newer iPhone, and like this one that has the newer camera on it, it shoots in ProRes, which is already formatted perfectly with Final Cut. I can import an hour worth of just raw footage of that into Final Cut. That'll be all ready for me to edit within 3 or 4 minutes, an hour's worth of footage. And then when I'm actually doing the editing workflow of all the video, it never skips a beat. It never hiccups, anything like that. It is so flawless. Bouncing out, a 10-minute video takes me 4 minutes flat every time. It has made my work life so much easier for YouTube. And I actually think it looks better than the DSLR does. But I've actually been debating doing a video about that and kind of going outside of the music stuff for once and kind of saying, look, this is the DSLR, which is a good DSLR. It's a Sony. I like it. And this is the Mac. Like, this is just what you're on your phone. This isn't like a high-end like, this is just what's on your phone. Like, is it really worth spending the money on a DSLR at this point, on an entry-level kind of one? I don't think it is.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't... So I went the Windows route because I had an iMac, one of the little 21.5 inch that was maybe 2 generations before they went over to the M1. And I hated it. It was awful. It just never worked great. It was always, giving me hiccups. And I spent probably, because I had to upgrade the RAM, I had to go somewhere to get it done because I stupidly bought the 21.5 inch, which didn't have the little hatch in the back. So I probably ended up spending about $1,900 all said and done on the whole thing, which was, it was ridiculous because I think it cost me $16 new, and then I think I spent $300 putting new RAM in that stupid thing. And so I ended up selling it to a friend actually who's probably listening to this going like, what, you're gonna say it's a shitty machine? It's totally fine for what I gave it to him for. Anyway, so I went out and I bought a new I bought a I bought a Windows. I built a PC for this, right? I spent $1,800, and I literally can run this thing with 14 tracks of drums running with live plugins going on it at a buffer rate of 32, and I don't even get a hiccup. It's insane, right? And then, I see some of these people doing this stuff in Logic and, like you're saying in Pro Tools too, on these tiny new little $700 M1 Macs, and they're getting the same performance. And I'm like, man, my timing fucking sucks, apparently, So I don't know, man. Part of me is just thinking like, oh, a lot of these gains are only in Logic because Logic's optimized for the M1, and then sometimes I hear otherwise, and I don't know. I think I'm too old to learn a new DAW properly, and I don't know if they fixed it too, but we used to work in Logic for school, and I hated editing in it. Mostly was my issue. For some reason, I just could never get into the like drum workflow with it. For Pro Tools, just kills drum editing. I don't know what it is about it. There's something about it. It just works the best for drum editing, and I do a lot of drum editing, so I don't know if I could go back to Logic, but I'm hearing great things. It's making me. I love the M1 that I have, even though I mostly use it for like home office stuff, and then I have like 3D printing software on it that I use with 3D printer. But I don't know, man. You're saying Pro Tools runs great on it. I might be due for an upgrade. Plus, I have this really shitty thing where I bought a motherboard that was supposed to work with Thunderbolt, but it's Windows, so it doesn't work with Thunderbolt. And I have a Thunderbolt Focusrite here that's just, I'm using an ADAT right now because it won't connect to the computer. So I'm thinking about it at some point. I'm not there yet, but some point.
I think when this computer that you're using right now gives out, that would be the time to do it. I don't think it's anything worth rushing for. If you were doing more video editing or you were doing stuff like what I do, I'd say it's absolutely worth it. But because you're not, I would say, nah, there's not really a need. I'm going to talk you off the cliff. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not necessary.
I'm not thinking about doing it right now or anything. I mean, like you said, it would be one thing if this computer was on its way out. I will say, man, Windows just sucks with audio stuff. It is the worst. Like once it's running, like once you get everything going, it's amazing. It just does what I want it to do, and it never gives me shit, which is way more than I can say about the most of the Mac machines I've had that I've run audio stuff on, which I know isn't really everybody's experience with it, but I think I do a lot more live input than most people do, right? Which is why I run into so many issues. But it just, every time like I buy a new interface, I'll plug it in, and it's like 3 days of troubleshooting shit to get it to work the way I want it to. Whereas with a Mac, like you plug one in and it just works exactly the way you want it to right from the get-go. That being said, getting anywhere near the specs that this computer have would have cost me at least double, I mean, and there's something to be said for that too, like, do I need to pay the Apple tax?
But is it even a tax at this point? Because you said you have the base one. This is the base MacBook Pro, and this handles more than what I can throw at it. And this was, I think, I spent $800 less because I got this on sale, $800 less than what you spent. So I mean, granted, different time and everything like that, but I mean, it's not like, I think that Apple's done a really good job in that aspect as far as being able to get people into these M1s, because the Mac Minis, like you mentioned, those are really cheap to get, the baseline ones of those, and those are damn well good enough. You could run everything you really needed outside of like really excessive stuff on that and be fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, I've got one, so if I really wanted to, I could probably give it a shot, I think I would just need to get something to replace the, what it's doing right now. But yeah, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll take a week and run the Mac as opposed to the Windows. Although it'd probably take me a week just to get all my plugins reinstalled.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't miss those days. I don't miss those days
yeah,
at all.
Yeah. And every time you end up switching a computer, you find out like half the stuff you got to upgrade to get it to work with the new software you're running on. Maybe it wouldn't be worth the experiment. Yeah.
No, and then this is not, this version of this software is not compatible with your OS system, so you just can't use it, period. Or you can pray that Rosetta will do it, but no, it's there's a lot to it. It would be one of those things where if you were starting a rig from scratch, like entirely, plugins included, then yeah. But I mean, you're so invested at this point, I don't think it would be a smart choice.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll do a little bit more research and see. Because the other thing too is that I've been finding, and I don't know, maybe you don't have the same problem I do. I open up my plugins list on Pro Tools, and I end up just scrolling through, going like, what the hell is all this stuff? I've got so many plugins that I've amassed over the years that I've like never even used because they either came with a bundle or like it was like, buy 2 get 1 free or whatever, and like I've never touched them. I don't even know what they are. Like I have my go-tos. And then, like, you know, if I need something that I don't normally use, I usually end up using the stock Pro Tools version of it or whatever, and it's fine. Like, I always use the Pro Tools gate because it just is easy, you know? Like, even though I probably own 20 other plugin gates, but, you know, like, I don't know, maybe I'll just clean them out and just start over.
It wouldn't be the end of the world. And a lot of the ones, I was like that too, but when I reinstalled onto this computer, I didn't do that on purpose. I thought, what are the ones I actually use every time I'm in a session? And those are the ones I kept. And I went from there because I hated that. I hated going through and when you click on, harmonics, seeing a drag down list that is so far down that it takes you 2 minutes to scroll to the bottom of it. I don't have time for that anymore. Like, I don't want to deal with it. I like simplicity. I know some people, they like having a gajillion options. They like having a gajillion parameters, desktop editor software, all this fun stuff. And I want some of it, but I don't need all of it at this point.
I want some of it for an amount of time for me to decide which parts of it I want, and then I want it gone. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, so no, I mean, moral of the story here is I have to say Apple are doing a pretty good job. There's other things that are going on with Apple that we don't need to get into that don't have anything to do with audio as far as the phones. And if you break the screen and you don't get it replaced at the Apple store, the Face ID just will never work. It just doesn't work anymore. And they did that design on purpose. So that's kind of shitty of them. But as far as the actual computers themselves go, I think they're doing pretty good. And I think that the prices are finally somehow kind of, really reasonable.
Yeah, I think for what you're getting, sure. I mean, I don't feel like I felt that way about any of the Intel products, right? It really felt like you were paying, those baseline models were kind of like, they were a reasonable price, but they were terrible performance. And then to get them to anywhere reasonable, you were, shilling tons of money for them. And now I think with with their M1s, they're doing a better job, but I still just sort of feel like I don't have a great reason, and I'm just gonna, the greedy little kid in me is gonna keep trying to come up with one to need to buy a new computer, until my wife kind of gives me the quick old slap in the face, like, stop that, but.
Yeah, that's, I was like that with the guitars. That's why I started to buy and sell them. And once my wife saw I was making money doing it, she's like, buy all the guitars you want. And I'm like, this is awesome. And before we get into the albums, I wanted to ask you, you got the guitar. You've had it for a little bit. What do you think about that PRS?
It is amazing. It's fantastic. It came, it's pristine. The plastic's still on the back, plastic. The covers. It literally not a scratch on it. There's not buckle scratch. There's not pick scratch. I would never be able to know it was used if I didn't buy it as a used guitar. The neck's in great shape. The action was a little bit high. It was not in tune, unfortunately. But it came in 3 days from Japan, so I'm not complaining. The gig bag's in great shape. It was, everything on it's great. It's fantastic. If I had to say any criticisms, the neck is glossier than I thought, which was a little bit disappointing based on the fact that it's a maple neck, right? Like, I guess I always think like satin finish maple neck, like, Fender style. And it was not that, which is fine. I think I'll probably take a Brillo pad to it and kind of cool it down a little bit because it's definitely got that like thick poly stick. Yeah. But it plays great. I haven't really messed around with it plugged in too much yet. It's been kind of sitting over in the house, and I've just kind of been like, picking it up here and there. Although it is making an appearance in the music video, but I'm not expecting great things out of the pickups. I plugged it in once, and I was kind of like, okay, maybe I just don't have things dialed in right for this guitar. But they are the stock SE pickups, and they're exactly what I expected, which is fine. And for what I paid for it, I don't even care about swapping pickups.
I do know. I started to laugh because once you started saying, I haven't really plugged it in yet, and I'm like, that's because you don't like the SE electronics. You haven't. And that's one of those things where you get so much guitar with those SEs. And even with the S2s, you get so much guitar. But I do not care for the electronics in those either. I totally understand.
Yeah. And like, if you're paying full price for a PRS, it bothers me that I don't like the electronics, right? Like, I don't want to pay over $1,000 for a guitar I have to rip everything off of, right? To me, there are plenty of guitars I can spend $1,000 on and love what it already comes with. And it's probably the only thing that ever bothers me about PRS is just that they have a lot of offerings, especially in their upper price range, that I still feel like I'd have to replace stuff on it, you know? And luckily this is in the range where I don't care.
Yeah. And that was, a big flaw for me for both the McCartys I had, the S2s. The guitars themselves were phenomenal. The electronics, I didn't like either of them. I just didn't like either of them. I didn't think they fit either guitar. I didn't think they sounded great. I mean, you can always EQ stuff, and I did. You can get by. And I'm not saying they sound bad, but here's the thing that you got to think about here, right? We give Gibson a lot of shit for their really expensive stuff. And up until this price increase, a Les Paul Classic was $2,000. McCarty 594, $1,750, I believe, was the stock price for the S2. It was still coming out to $2,000 because you'd have to throw in decent pickups in it that were, at the level of even the ones that come in the Classic. Because I think those 61s sound infinitely better than the Korean GBE ones that come in the PRS S2 line. That's just me. So, I mean, I think playability-wise and consistency-wise, you're still smarter, and most of the time you're going to get a better guitar if you get the Paul Reed Smith in that instance. But it's still, it's not like you're saving as much as you might think you are.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, it's a weird space to me where they're in Gibson's the same way, and to obviously, Fender does the same, where it's just like, why are they refusing to go with a different brands? Why are they not farming out brands to yeah, or like you get some of these LTDs that got Fluence, they got bare knuckles, they're doing all sorts of different stuff. So like, why is it that they're just exclusively keeping their owns when they're their own brands in there when they're not like known for being great? I mean, it's not. I mean, obviously it must be that it's cheaper for them, but you got to think like, I mean, these other brands are doing it for a reason, right? People go buy guitars that have Fluences in them because they sound incredible. So, I don't think PRS even offers any aftermarket pickups in any of their standard guitars, right? I mean, I think Gibson does maybe in a spare line or two, but I don't know. I mean, I wonder why this is a hill that the PRS is willing to die on,
Spacing. The PRS pickup spacing is different than most other humbuckers. I think that's part of the problem. But I don't think that that's a big enough excuse to not be collaborating and making better use of this, because you could get away. I think if they threw in even, DiMarzios or Duncan's, like run-of-the-mills, like 59 and a JB, they offered those in the SE Custom 24s, you can get away with charging probably $1,100 for that guitar, and people would gladly pay it because the guitar is almost done at that point.
And I'm sure is more than they'd be paying to, put that set in there, obviously. So, and that obviously you got there much quicker than I was, but yeah, that's my point, right? Like, you can charge extra. You're going to get people who would have avoided a PRS because they were like, oh, I'm not going to spend an extra couple $100. Especially if you're not the type of person who does that kind of work on your own. Like, not only do you have to go buy a set of pickups, but you got to go pay somebody to put them in, like you're talking a decent chunk of change, at the end of it. And if like all PRS has to do is offer a secondary line with, custom pickups in it or a brand pickup in it, and they're making extra money, like why wouldn't you do it? I don't know. Seems weird to me, but I think Paul's always kind of been real nitpicky about stuff he does, and he must have a reason. Spacing, I guess, would be one, but that seems like a weird. I don't know. Like, it's not enough,
I understand. Yeah, Paul is a strange guy. I think he's a genius, but I think he's maybe sometimes too stubborn for his own good. But yeah, no, I'm glad that you like the guitar. It is, when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's mint. And I knew what to expect because I ordered from Japan from different shops all the time, but that's a good one. The one that we went from for that, I had that PRS. So, I mean, that's fantastic. And this has been an eye-opening experience for you, I imagine, as well. And I'm glad it's worked out, and I can't wait to see it in the video. So speaking of music and music videos, let's get to our album reviews. I asked you to listen to Strung Out, the Element of Sonic Defiance. What did you think?
Man, this was a weird album. it was a very strange album. I feel like I'm supposed to have a story every time now, right? But I don't really have a story with it. I will say, so first impression listens were like, it felt like a band that was made for a movie, there, and I say that mostly because of the singer. I think the singer sounds like, if I picture punk band in my head, he's what comes out of it, right? And I actually think that was kind of a detriment to the band. I really liked the other players, and I thought they were doing some really interesting things, and they were really good. And then I felt like he was just kind of like quintessential punk singer and kind of wasn't elevating it like the rest of them were. I didn't dislike him by any means, but I was like, hey, there's some really interesting stuff going on here, and he was just kind of right where you thought he was going to be. I remembered you also said stuff about the production, which was very interesting too. It was more production than I was expecting for the genre, which was interesting. But then upon further listening, like, you can kind of tell that these guys really know what they're doing, and they're clearly pushing that kind of thing. And again, I think it's sort of the singer that's sort of keeping them stuck in this little punk box. The other thing I noticed that I thought was really, really strange was, like, I don't think they played to a click. Like, there's all these weird, like, moments where things kind of slow down and speed back up. It sounds like the guitar player laid down all the scratch tracks and then the drummer played to them. And, like, because the drummer was great. He's really good. They could clearly play to a click, and I don't know why they didn't. Because there's moments where the guitar player's chugging and he's slowing down, and everybody's slowing down, and then they play the next part and they speed back up, and I'm like, this is weird. Like, and it's happening too fast to feel like it's on purpose. But overall, I enjoyed it. I'm going to give it another listen. There was a couple of tracks that really stuck in the punk thing that were kind of just like, all right, guys, move on. Like, I know you're capable of doing more here. And there was a couple of big kind of open melodic things that were super cool, and I wanted them to lean more into that. The two guitar players were fantastic together. They were doing really interesting things off of each other instead of just playing power chords, which is always appreciated in punk stuff, very cool, very weird. Not what I was expecting. From there was more going on than I thought initially, which is always pleasant to hear. I don't know. I wish I had a better kind of review for it. It just sort of weirded me out the whole way through. Every turn was just a little bit stranger than the last, and yeah.
Yeah, that album gets me in the same way. I love it because it does. It feels like a grindhouse soundtrack. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like one of those like crazy gory movies. And like, this is the entire soundtrack to it. And there's one song in specific, I don't know if you'll remember it by name, but it's called Razorblade, where it starts off where he's riding the hat, and it's just like really ominous. And just the way that they produce the bass coming in, with the amount of compression on it, and then the guitars on top, it's just, I was like, ooh, it's like, this is so creepy. But I like when music can make you feel any like sense of like real strong emotion, whether it's something like that or something, really happy or sad. I feel like they're doing a really good job. The drummer is a god. He's even better live than on record. And it's funny you mentioned the thing about the timing, because I read this years ago. I'm not sure if I could find it again, but apparently it was deliberate. They wanted to do random things. They wanted to make you. They wanted to freak the listener out. And part of me is like, I buy that. Yeah, part of me buys it, because the way that the record is produced is at such a high level, and the decisions that they made as musicians are at such a high level that I'm like, I don't see why they wouldn't have played to a click. And there's other albums where it's not like this at all, because they have a plethora of albums, and this is the only one where he kind of does this. This was kind of like a mid-release for them. It wasn't one of the bigger ones that people, when they talk about Strung Out, they go to. But I think it's the most interesting. And that's why I picked this one out of all the ones from Strung Out for you to listen to. So, but I appreciate your takeaway. And you don't always need a story, Dave. You don't always need a story.
I mean, it feels like it's a brand at this point, but no, I know. I just I threw this one on real quick while I was doing some stuff, and just like, kind of like, huh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the tempo thing was strange, mostly because. And maybe this is just the way that I listen to things now, that I just expected it. And when it wasn't doing it and it wasn't following it, it was doing it in such weird ways that it didn't feel deliberate, you know. I don't know, man. Like, I guess I can see it definitely gave me that kind of like, and in that way kind of made me pay more attention. So maybe it did exactly what they were trying to.
Yeah, because they're probably one of the top 5 bands I've ever seen live. And I've seen them countless times. They are so much better live than on record. And on record, they're pretty good. But live, dude, it is unbelievable. The singer does lean really heavy into the trope, as they say. But I think he does. I think he's pretty good. It doesn't bother me. Like with some singers, it'll bother me, but I get what you're saying. Like he doesn't have that little extra thing to it in some of the songs where you're like, the rest of the band is like here. Like you need to get up to here, especially one of the slower songs. It's not I wouldn't call it a ballad by any means, but it's one of the ones that has like the really big build up into it. I kept waiting for him to do more, and it just didn't happen. But the rest of the band did.
It felt like the rest of the band was a little tongue-in-cheek about the punk thing, right? Like they were like, we're playing punk, and then they would open up into these moments of like, yeah, we know we're playing punk, but look what else we can do. And it just felt like the singer never did that. Like he was just kind of like, I'm a punk singer. And then like you kind of kept where you're like, okay, but where's your tongue-in-cheek thing? And it just sort of like never really happened, you know? And that's fine, whatever. Like, I guess I'm demanding too much out of him, but you know, there just were moments where I was like, man, these guitar players are like, it really felt like some of that, not Kazaya protest stuff, but maybe the stuff before it when you were kind of like going, where could this go? You know, like it's raw and it's sort of like untamed a little bit, but like you can see these nuggets there, and he just like never went with the rest of it.
No, I understand. That's a fair assessment, but overall, yeah, I really like that album, and the drummer is so good, so good. But you gave me Tiny Moving Parts, Swell. Now, what record did you tell me? I forget which one it was. I asked you to review it, and you were like, within the first 30 seconds, you're like, I know what this entire album is going to sound like. And that was this one with a slight alteration to it. He comes in, and I'm like, the first thing I thought, honestly, was, I wish I had heard this when it came out, because hearing this band for the first time, it already sounded dated. It sounded so dated to me, because all I could think of, like, I felt like I walked into a Hot Topic, dude. I was like, I'm looking around like, am I in a mall? Like, was I just at the arcade? Like, what's going on here? Is everything all right? Did I get any sleep after the gig last night? But, and then it kind of, the guitar starts going into a Protest the Hero kind of thing, more so than the last record that you had me listen to with the clean Protest the Hero. This one reminded me a lot more of it. And there was points in the record where I'm like, yeah, this is definitely like if Taking Back Sunday, Blink-182, and Protest the Hero had a kid. And then all of a sudden, I forget which song it is, but I hear the girl come in the background vocals. And I'm like, it's fucking Kazaya. I'm like, you son of a bitch. Now, I don't know.
I got you to listen to Midwest emo version of Kazaya.
And honestly, that's the best way I can describe that this album is the archetype of, if somebody was just like, what is Midwest emo? I'd be like, I just point right to it, be like, that's it. That is it. Like, these guys were really mad after that football game. Something didn't go down. They are pissed off at that jock. This guy is going to write, Taylor Swift style lyrics, except scream about them. And it's just going to be so emotional. But
it does, yeah.
No, but that's the beauty of that genre, man. Like like bands like Saves the Day, they do the same stuff. But I mean, you don't always have to have this like super intricate like wordsmith about how you write your songs. And sometimes it can actually detract from what you're trying to say if you get like a little too peek into it. So in that aspect, I think it was really digestible. I think it was really, really well put together. I love that the drummer looks like Howard Stern from the 80s. And that it wasn't just a costume for one of the music videos.
Nope, yeah, huge mustache every time.
The big old fro. Oh, I love it. I love that. I got a big kick out of that. The lead singer, he looks like the guy that's in every Adam Sandler movie. Swartzen.
Just in the back going.
Nick Swartzen. Yeah, he looks like Nick Swartzen. Yeah. And the way he would, like, when he would do the lightning thing, I was like, oh my God, if you ever were really famous, Nick Swartzen would literally play you in the movie. It would be perfect. I would love it. But again, another band that I have to give my shout out as far as the musicianship. They're all good. I love the drummer. I thought the drummer absolutely crushed this record. He did a very, very, very good job, and especially parts where the record starts to get tame. And it's good that it gets tame because you can't go at that pace of that kind of emo stuff for the whole record. The ear fatigue is too much. But he did a good job, especially of using dynamics well. And I love the fact that there wasn't too much bus compression on the drums themselves, where it let the dynamics kind of feel natural. And that's one thing it's just as a general production thing that bothers me with bands. They're like, oh, we do have a soft spot in that song. It's like, well, technically you wrote a soft spot for that, but when it was mixed and engineered, because it's so goddamn compressed, there's no dynamic range to it. So there's not like, there isn't like that feeling of a drop off. There's not a break like you think there might be. And that's just something that I guess when you were talking about things that like you're just so used to hearing, I was very happy that this band, they didn't do that, and that there was enough dynamic range sonically for things to breathe when it was time to calm down. I think the singer had a good voice. He did kind of, like I said, it sounded like Blink at times, but then it sounds like Protest the Hero mixed with Taking Back Sunday at the others. Like, but as far as how he sung, he's perfect for that genre. Like, just all around like that. Again, if I had to tell somebody for an archetype of, if you want to know what Midwest emo is, that is that band, 100%. Good band, good record.
Yeah, I love them. We've seen them live a bunch of times. They're fantastic live. I am like immensely amazed that they're a three-piece, and that he's belting and playing all of that insane guitar stuff with all of that tapping flawlessly, you know, and they're just ripping. They sound huge, and he plays a sky blue thin line telly that is disgusting and messed up, and but it's the only guitar he plays, and it's fantastic sounding. The other thing that I think is really cool about them is that they're they just, for as sad as the Midwest emo kind of trope is, they're just happy dudes. You watch them play, they're all big goofy smiles, like, and they're just fun dudes. So we did a Q&A when one of the shows that we went to with them, and so like Swell isn't as much as some of their older stuff, but there's obviously a lot of math going on with their stuff too, right? Like they're Midwest emo math rock, right? Tons of different, so I assumed that they were probably pretty theory versed, right? And we were at this Q&A with him, and he said something about, he's like, yeah, we threw like a capo in this song because, like, how sometimes it's weird, like you play a song higher so you end up having to sing lower. And he's like, I don't know why that is. And I was like, well, because you brought the key up high enough that you are singing down the octave. And he's like, yeah, man, I don't know what you're saying, whatever, And I was just like, dude, like these guys rip and they have no idea what they're doing, like, which is hysterical to me, right? Because it sounds like there's intent there, right? But they're just, I don't know how they did it.
Luck of the draw.
Yeah, I guess so. They're fantastic. Those albums are great. I actually didn't put, I didn't even think about the female singer harmony thing in the Kazaya kind of back and forth. That's pretty funny. But dude, he writes big hooky choruses over mathy stuff with lots of cool tapping guitars. Like, that's it. That premise alone, that sells me. And if you want to get me to listen to a record religiously, that's all you need.
Yeah, just I have a very, very good kind of mock singing voice of that. I actually think it's probably my best singing voice, is like the I'm pretending to be an emo singer thing. I should just cut like a song of that, just like for fun.
You should.
Just for no, I don't actually want to release it, but I just mean like just send to you, just to send to you and be like, look, like yeah, like I can.
Hey man,
I can,
it's a good sound. It works. I think it's funny that you like, I got into this like kind of emo phase way later in life, so I don't have this like this high school Hot Topic thing to bring it back to. And it's funny that every time I show someone Tiny Moving Parts, they're like, man, this brings me back to high school. And I'm like, I just started listening to these guys, like, I don't even, like, no, they're great, stop, it's funny. It's just I don't know, man, there's something about emo music. It's just like, I like listening to sad songs. They make me feel good. And I'm never gonna Hot Topic away that love of mine,
Okay, then you've made my decision really easy for the record I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give you a Saves the Day record. But which one is the question? This is a tough one. And I know they're looking at me on the podcast, and I'm staring over at the other monitor. I'm just checking which one has shattered. Yep. Okay. Sound the alarm.
Okay.
Saves the day. Sound the alarm.
I have listened to some Saves the Day. I don't know. Sound the alarm.
Yeah, I think that'll be the one you like the most. It's not my favorite one, but there's a lot. I don't have one that's like not my favorite. Probably the most recent one, because it gets like, they kind of do that thing that Weezer just kind of did, where they go back to trying to sound really like poppy, and it's a little much for me at this point. But there's not like a bad record from them, in my opinion, as a whole. But that one, I think, has enough, like, it's definitely emo, but it's a lot more angsty than some of the crying parts. It gets pretty intense. Good guitar work too, I have to say.
Yeah, I remember enjoying them quite a bit. I just I can't remember which album we got into.
Yeah, probably At Your Funeral. Well, which one had At Your Funeral on it? God, I'm old. Sometimes it takes me a minute. That's just self-titled. Stay What You Are. You probably listen to Stay What You Are. But yeah, that has.
Does it have a white and green album cover?
It's white. It's not green. We'll figure it out. It's not here. What do you have for me, Dave?
All right. I've got give me a A or a B.
Okay, I'll go B.
Okay. All right. I've avoided this up until this point, but I think it'll be fun to do. So I'm gonna have you listen to an Arcane Roots album, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but the singer and guitar player of Arcane Roots produced our last record, or this upcoming record, sorry, and they're one of my favorite bands of all time, and I think he's an absolute genius, although I may be a little bit biased. But I'm curious to see what you think. I would like to also hear what you think about what you think this means about our upcoming music, based on hearing his work. You know what? It's not my favorite of theirs. It's still great, but it's not my favorite out of theirs. But I'm gonna say their last album, because I think it's the most kind of reminiscent of what he did with us. So it's called Melancholia Hymns, and Arcane Roots. It's a fantastic album. Yeah, it's good stuff, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I'm curious to listen to it. You haven't given me a record that I really disliked yet, so I mean, it's not going to be anything that I'm going to say, this sucks, We'll get to that point, I'm sure, but when we do this long enough, that we'll start really making each other suffer with some just knowingly bad music.
Just some gnarly stuff.
Just for the sake of the viewers. But we won't say it's bad, just because there are some people that comment, they're like, oh, I like that album that you guys talked about, or, oh, I listened to that too, or I know that. And I'm like, part of me wants to screw with people and be like, yeah, you think so? All right, well, listen to this. But you have to listen to the whole thing 20 times to really understand.
Yeah.
I love when you say that. It took me about 20 minutes to really appreciate that music. No.
Yeah, it's weird. Maybe we should get into this at some point. Like, I definitely have records that I listened to and didn't like the first time, and then but when we got to the 20th listen, I was like, this is amazing. How did I? But like, what's that spark? It's like getting into smoking. Like the first cigarette is the fucking worst. But like, why did I keep smoking? Like, and then you get to the point where you're totally addicted. But why? What's the magic thing that happens on the first listen of an album that you hate that compels you to listen to it again?
One of your friends telling you that you have to listen to it 20 times.
Yeah.
I think that alone is a good parameter here of a situation where that might be the occurrence. And in regards to the cigarettes, I think it's a similar thing. It's somebody that smokes and are like, oh, dude, your first one's going to be terrible. It's fine. But once you're done with that pack and you go out for a beer the next night, you're going to be killing for one. And sure as shit you are.
Yep.
It's not cool.
Yep.
So screw whoever is the first person. Don't ever introduce anybody to cigarettes. Even if you smoke, don't do it. Don't bump somebody that doesn't smoke cigarettes a cigarette. Don't do it. It's wrong. It's wrong.
How long you been off? I'm now at almost 2 years.
Not that long, maybe a year and a half. But before that, I didn't smoke. I only went back to smoking for a month. Before that, it was like 5 years. So, yeah, it was just when the whole world literally was just like the collapse of civilization. You all lose your jobs and you are stuck in a 600 square foot house in California. I was like, I'm going to start smoking and drinking every day again. This seems like a good way to cope with things. It wasn't, but it resulted in me not doing either one ever again. So, yeah, I'd call that a win.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So, anything else you'd like to add today, or are we going to call this a night?
I think we're calling it a night.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all for listening so much. We really do appreciate it. If there are topics that you would like us to hit on in the future, be sure to leave a comment. Also, subscribe to the channel. That really helps us. And other than that, we will see you for the next podcast. Dave, is the next one the live one?
I think it is. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, well, regardless of that, then we'll make a formal announcement. If you made it to this point in the video, I mean, you're gonna be around for that one regardless here. So we'll have a formal announcement in the middle of the week, making sure that it's a live one. If not, regular scheduled program. It will air on Monday. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and I hope the rest of your week doesn't suck. Take care.